ones I'll maybe go a little bit more frequently with. All right, so yesterday we were taking a look at Catcher in the Rye, and really the kind of the final question that we came to at the end of the class, what's the point? What's the purpose? Which tends to be one of the more difficult questions to consider, and for you will be one of the more important questions to consider, because you will have a writing assignment, essay, with Catcher in the Rye, and at some point within that essay, you're going to have to address purpose, overall significance, that kind of concept. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to agree on what one would be. There's certainly some flexibility with it, but you're going to have to be able to kind of come up with what that overall idea would be. Anybody have a purpose? I mean, Luke's purpose is to deceive. Ray's purpose is to go to Hatteras for vacation. How's that make you feel, Jack? Isolated, lonely, feeling holden.
We had 4 of us and then we lost 2 of them.
Yeah, but
What do you mean, 4
5.
Oh, like male,
Yeah.
feeling a little outnumbered.
or and Ben.
Yeah, 4 and
Ben's not here.
I'm a loud. Where's Ben?
Yesterday, I think it was 5th period. It wasn't your class. 5th period, no, because it was, I think, where Jack was sitting, and this was definitely not Jack. Person in Jack Seek's 5th period basically said, and I'm not quoting, but paraphrasing, I love Holden. I don't think she's on the verge of proposing marriage or anything to an imaginary character, although you never know, things happen. But like she likes Holden, okay? And so question was, would you recommend the book to other people? And she said yes. And some of you might agree with it, others go, no, I'm not recommending this book to anybody. If you, a person who has not read the book, and you go, I think this would be a good book for you to read. Person then reads it. What is it about Holden that you thought would be good for me to read? I could see people taking offense to it. At the same time, one of the things that folks most often cite is that they find Holden to be relatable. Again, now you go, Jack, I really think you should read that. You and Holden, I think you'll see things in a similar way. Why do you think I'm about to, go into a downward spiral and I'm going to attempt to maybe run away from home and marry a deaf mute in the woods of Colorado, Mr. Kane? What is it that you're trying to tell me? So, what, and I'm not necessarily worried about purpose yet, answering that kind of question. What is it about the book that can? Because you don't have to go, yes, I do find it relatable. I mean, some people will, some people won't. But that's commonly what gets used, that people go, I can relate to Holden, I can relate to how he can feel. How can you relate to something that some folks might not necessarily like being associated with him? I guess number one, do you find him relatable? And then if so, in what manner?
It's like the universal theme of growing up, I think. And I think everyone can relate to that because everyone has to grow up. So like maybe not the particular thoughts that goes on in his mind, but just the aspect of having to go from more of a youth kind of standpoint to adult kind of viewpoint on the world.
Where are you on that scale? Youth, adult?
Probably like in the middle.
That's the cop-out answer. Like, anybody still youth? Like, I am not growing up? Or does anyone feel at the point where I am, which is...
I said that I feel like I'm simultaneously both extremes.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, in what way? See, this is DRQ prep. You need evidence, and you need to explain it.
I like depends on where, I feel like it depends on the situation you're in, like where you're at. Because some people, some places you're less mature than others.
Sure. I mean, and to say that we all go on the same, trajectory or linear progression is absolutely, going to be false. And you could probably think of some adults who have not reached adult level, and you can think of some 8-year-olds who are convinced, they will be 35, next week, in the way that maybe they do act or try to act. Anyone else have any thoughts on where you are so far as that adult to childhood? Like Aiden said, sometimes a little simultaneous both. What aspects of your lives, again, I'm not looking like for personal information coming out here, but like in what ways would you say adulthood has begun?
Everyone has jobs, and a lot of us have jobs.
Okay,
But,
so employment.
yeah, it's
All right, so
yeah.
if I go to Chick-fil-A and start yelling at Aiden that my order was not done correctly, we're having an adult moment taking place. So yeah, it could be job, employment, and even something, I mean, for a lot of folks, first job ends up being like babysitting or whatnot. Which you think about it, and I don't know when some of you started babysitting, could have been like as young as 11, 12 years old. Essentially, we're entrusting Abigail with the life of another person. That's a very adult thing to do. Was she ready for it at 12? I don't know. But yeah, so jobs. And I think that's probably going to be the main one that most people, especially come 11th grade, 12th grade, are going to mention. Anything else adult-like or adult-ish about current?
I feel like we're thinking about our future right now, like what we want to do for the rest of our lives. So like,
What are you going to do for the rest of your life?
like me specifically,
Yeah.
probably go into music in some area, like either be a music teacher or I don't know. Like I don't want to like I play cello, so like really
What's a
cool to be
cello?
in an orchestra, but like
What's a
it's
cello?
hard. It's
She's
like
in
really
music.
hard without my
Is that a saw?
Look, he's got like career. What are you gonna do?
No, I just
Yeah. Adult-like, child-like. You have toward the end of the year, we'll do your college application essays. Colleges, university, where are you going to go? What are you going to major in? They tend to be reflective essays, where you are supposed to be adult-like in the sense that you can maybe understand the significance of some moments that have taken place in your life. So that whole reflection process can be very adult-like. In what ways are you kids? And whether that's a good sense or a bad sense.
Still live with our parents and go to school and are pretty dependent on adults.
Okay, so still dependent upon people to get you through the day or to help, whether, and that could be different things for some of you. Some of you do your own laundry, some of you throw it in a big pile and hope that it magically disappears at the end of the week. Some of you are very good at preparing mac and cheese and ramen noodles and 3-course meals of Doritos, Pringles, and pretzels. Others are sitting at the table at 5:15, pounding knife and fork, going, "Where's my food? Where's my food?" Budget, money, things like that. Those could be things that, and again, there's varying levels. Chores at home, responsibilities. Some are very adult-like, some are very kid-like, some are, I'm not going to leave my room until they kick me out. So yeah, okay. What else? Kid-wise. Why is it such a big deal? And I assume, like Olivia, when you said that transition, like in the sense that it's stressful.
Yeah.
Okay. What is it about going from child to adult that causes stress?
Like baby kids are easy. So you got a whole bunch of responsibilities.
Okay, so keep the responsibilities, the expectations that are going to be placed upon people, making a choice for that career and whatnot.
I guess like when you're still in like high school, you're still considered like a kid, like you're living off your parents, like they do a lot of decisions for you, but like once you hit college, you're like by yourself and no one's there to like do everything for you.
Wake you up.
Yeah.
I suggest laundry, cold water, because then you just throw everything together. Don't worry about if it's cold water, you can. Eventually, everything ends up being gray, which is a very flexible shade that goes along with anything, so it'll be okay. All right, so the overall stress aspect ends up kind of being a big thing. Now, I think most folks would probably agree Holden tends to go under different kind of stressful situations or stress causers than other folks. But Holden, versus everyone, I don't mean versus in the sense that there are going to be conflict, but what is it then about his interactions or his experiences? So like the stress that he deals with that you would find then to be kind of relatable. What else? Stress, pressures of growing, maturing.
School for sure.
That's the number one for me.
As a stress or as like?
That is a stress.
Okay. Do you think he's stressed out by it?
No, but he doesn't like apply himself. So kind of like it makes me think that like he like tries, he can't understand something, and then he's just like, okay, I'm not doing this.
And I don't have a set answer that I'm going to point to, like page 74 is where I think the answer. Do you think he cares?
Oh,
Portion.
not
I
even a little
that's the
bit.
thing.
Yeah, that's what I.
He
So
cares
I
to
think
a
that like
degree.
5 schools.
And I mean, certainly when it comes to school, and then we'll start getting into ideas here. I mean, you could argue that grades and learning are two entities that we try to relate that might not always relate. A person could care about grades, but not care about learning. Person could not care about the grades and care about learning. I think it probably tends to be maybe the other way more common, especially when you're thinking about college transcripts and all those kinds of things. But do you think he cares? I know a whole bunch of hands went up. Carol, start with, we'll try to hit everyone.
Like the part where he's talking to the Mr. Angelini and he's like gives his like whole speech. I don't remember what it's like about. It's something about like having like learning and being like a scholar versus like,
And Antolini's kind of talking about like the size of your mind and all those things.
so like I feel like kind of the person of Holden is more about learning and he's like seeking something more than like grades and like it's kind of the thing where he's like trying to find like genuine relationships. It's kind of like he's looking for something deeper than the surface level.
Okay, so Holden could be more in the learning category, and again, this can certainly vary from place to place. But looking for something that's going to be that authentic or genuine, as opposed to grade, might not necessarily be that way. Michelle, and then Lexi will come over to you too.
And they also say is that like a lot of students like they think like a lot of things we learn are useless. I feel like Holden kind of embraces that. He's like, this stuff isn't meaningful. I don't really need to know this, so why should I waste my time? The subject he does best in is English. I feel like he finds more meaning in it from the books he reads and everything. So I think it's not that he just doesn't give a crap about it. He just wants it to be worth something to him.
Those of you in trig and pre-calc who have taken trig and pre-calc either know or will find out that the unit circle is the most important thing that you will ever know. Lexi and Abigail will basically explain to you that it unlocks the meaning to life.
Yeah,
By
that's
you
what
knowing
That was the worst.
square root
thing
of
I
2
had.
over 2,
You can find like a cosine,
It-
sine, tangent, cotangent.
it will be mind-blowing. You will all of a sudden understand everything. And I'm completely lying because you
But
will.
it's true. You learn it and it's like.
I know the cheat sheet shortcut that Mrs. Kane does not allow me to say to other people, but since she's not here this year, I can start spreading out that cheat sheet shortcut. But so there could be like the idea of and I mean the main question though, how is this going to be useful to me later on? Something like that with the unit circle might not necessarily come to fruition. Where certain classes, whether it be an English class, could be useful for the rest of your life. You could minor in philosophy like I did and have deep thoughts about being unemployed while you're trying to find a cello job. So yeah, you might find some things to be useful, others maybe not. So yeah, I think what's being taught and what you're supposed to do with that information could have a long way as to whether or not you're going to care about it.
I think the other thing that he was talking about with Mr. Angelini, he was like, you're going down a bad path, like you're gonna be there someday and you're not gonna be able to do anything since you never did anything with your life before. I think that like that stresses him out because he's depressed most of the time, and I think that he's worried about his future in a way that like, but he feels like he can't do anything about it because school's not his thing, and so he just keeps going to school, but like he's worried about what he's gonna do when he gets older. Because when people ask him about that kind of stuff, he's kind of just like deflects.
So that you could be feeling helpless for different reasons, but that idea of, and again, not loneliness in the sense of you have no one to talk to, you don't have any friends or anything like that, but there are certainly situations where probably all of us in this room have felt helpless to a certain extent. Seeing that with Holden gives you the ability to kind of identify with it a little bit. I don't remember if we mentioned this yesterday or not, but when you mentioning Antolini that you're not headed down a good road. anyone remember what he says? You're about to experience a significant or a big, and it was a word that we were making reference to a lot yesterday.
Fall.
You're going to have a great big fall, and I don't think it's necessarily Antolini going, you're going to grow up to be an adult or anything like that. But I think Salinger certainly is having a little bit of fun with the play on words, where Holden's job is to keep people from falling, but you're the one who's going to fall. You're so worried about everybody else and maybe preserving that innocence, that youth, which we could spend a whole day trying to figure out what does it mean to be innocent. But you're the one who's about to fall. After he leaves Antolini's house, anyone recall when he starts having his next conversation with Allie? When he's walking. He's walking down the block,
He's trying to cross the street, right?
Yeah.
He can't get across.
and he feels like he can't get to the other side, that he is beginning to fall. Where again, right after this conversation with Antolini, you're about to have this fall, this breakdown, and it's certainly starting to come at that point. I would say that that's probably when he is at the bottom, where he feels like essentially he is disappearing, he is helpless, and if he were to disappear, I mean, all of his fears are probably going to come to fruition. He looks at himself as being the only one who probably still cares about Allie in a deep, meaningful way. So if he's gone, no one's going to be there to care about Allie. If he's gone, no one's going to be there to catch, folks when they're going off the cliff. If he's gone, who's going to be there for Phoebe? Because DB's off in Hollywood. If he's gone, who's going to be the person to kind of keep that youth, innocence, help folks get through? And so that kind of coming into how Holden can be an everyman character, someone that we can relate to, I think maybe that follow-up question goes, do you think Salinger wants people to be like Holden? Or does he want people to avoid this guy at all costs? Don't go anywhere near him. And the best way to answer that question is to write an acronym going down the side of your page. What do we have to do? We haven't done one of these for a while. Hey! This is the one folks tend to ignore. I think this is the one that can be most helpful. What's that first S? Show off? Not show off. Thumbing through the notebook, trying to remember. Speaker. We're not going to say Holden, because speaker we go with author, but we're not going to say Salinger, because that doesn't mean anything, because we need to come up with more like abstract qualities about him. Who's our speaker? I mean, it is Salinger, but how would we identify him? Who's J.D. Salinger? Oh, he's the guy that... Now all the character traits that we start to mention. What do we know about him? Okay. From New York, grows up in New York. How's his academic career? A little questionable. Drops out of multiple schools. Worst English student in the history of Ursinus College. Okay, World War II. Ranging from events like D-Day to concentration camps. He experiences over 200 continual days of combat, which before he leaves the military, before he is discharged, spends time in a when we hold fingers, I really can't hear anything. Yeah, he checks himself into mental hospital because he's dealing with severe depression. Chances are he's probably experiencing what, which wouldn't really be identified by this term at that time. He's probably suffering from PTSD. Which, think about it, how can you blame him? D-Day, battle, concentration camps, seeing all those things, and then chasing the bad guys afterwards, so far as the interrogation and whatnot. As he grows up in life, what does he tend to do so far as him and society? Where's he go? Yeah, he goes up and Holden says, let's go to Massachusetts or Vermont. Salinger goes to Vermont, lives in his own place far up in the woods, doesn't really want people to see him. So he certainly isolates himself on his own terms, I would say, but isolates himself from everybody else. At this point, you kind of probably have to go, or not have to go, but if the argument is Salinger is saying don't be like Holden, what's going to be maybe a hole or a possible flaw within that argument? It certainly seems like he is Holden. Is a writer going to go don't be like me? I mean, it could happen, but to simply go, well, clearly he makes Holden out to be an ineffective youth person, not somebody who you would want to be with. For him to make that statement would basically be saying, "Look at me, my life's been terrible. Don't be like me." And that's I don't think Salinger's quite going to go that far with it. Occasion. What's going on occasion-wise? Anyone remember publication in the book year-wise?
Isn't this like right after World War II, like the 50s?
It's 1951 is publication, although it's getting written during World War II, to a large extent of it, but gets published 1951, post World War II. Most people, or a lot of people, historically look at the 1950s as kind of being the perfect time of Americana. You have happy families. Everyone has one boy, one girl, a dog, picket fence, all that kind of stuff. There's more cars out there. What's happening to the economy for the United States? It is booming. Manufacturing's at all-time high. Employment's at all-time high. So folks look at it as being a lot of consumerism. Economy is good. Now imagine being this person. Seeing people happy because look, we got a real refrigerator. We got this thing called a blender. I put the fruit and an ice in and it makes a smoothie. Yes! What could be better? How are you going to feel if you're that guy? Who saw a lot of friends die? Saw basically the worst of humanity when he goes into Dachau concentration camps and sees body after body after body still breathing, lying on top of one another, still has that aroma in the air that would be coming from the furnaces.
Things is kind of shallow in society.
I would think that you're probably going to look at it and see people as being shallow, not really understanding what's important. Dare we say the word, they might come off as being phony. Who would you say would be his intended audience? Salinger. Who's he reaching? And again, it could be multiple. It doesn't have to be just one. Okay. Would you say that's more adult or child?
Probably more now.
Okay. So the ones who are being, we won't use phony, we've used that enough, but shallow I think would be a good idea with the whole consumerism. Certainly I think there'd be another audience that would probably go along as well. Certainly would say that the adults would be one, no doubt. Salinger's on record as stating that he gets upset at the fact that the book does get removed from the shelves of schools and things like that because he wants to write to. He even uses the word children, and again, teenagers isn't a term that's really getting thrown around much in the 1950s. But yeah, whether it be teenagers, adolescents, kids, children, youngins, youth, rugrats,
That's actually 10th graders. You're beyond that level now. Should a 14-year-old read this book?
Definitely not 13.
13-year-old. Matt, you said definitely not 13.
13's a weird.
What do you have against 13?
No, but like 14, you start getting a little
13's
bit.
like 7th grade. Like they're dealing with
Yeah.
upcoming moments.
12.
They're all
No,
figured.
no, not no.
13.
Oh, it's definitely a no.
They can go on like 7th grade.
Well, I mean, they could, but like, yeah.
Purpose I'm not going to go to. Subject matter. What would you say overall subject? And so like now this would kind of be going back to things that we were talking about before. So the stress of aging or maturing growing up. Could certainly be a subject matter. What else?
It's really similar, but lots of innocence.
Okay. Anything else?
Being genuine.
Hear that, Luke? What would happen one day if you woke up and you were like a giant cockroach? You would curse me.
I would.
You made me read this stupid book in 10th grade, Metamorphosis. Luke's favorite book ever. Guy wakes up as a bug.
Oh my god.
A literal
Like
bug.
a life size, like a big bug. Or
Yes, very
Like a
large bug.
cockroach.
Oh,
Never says cockroach, but it's the
Right,
assumption
yeah.
it's probably cockroach.
He is gross. Everyone hates him.
What would the verb then be that would go into stress of growing up, loss of innocence, being genuine, or anything, else?
He can't even make his case.
This is true. And Dad pegs him with apples
Yeah. Beats him with a cane.
and the umbrella. And the sister plays the cello. Not really, it's a violin, but
Tatum.
what would be some verbs? For example, someone earlier threw out in the day, comfort. Comfort people about the stress of growing up. The girl sitting next to him went, "Aw."
This book is a very comforting.
Jordan?
Yeah, I don't feel like
So warn. Okay. If did you have a word that? No. Okay. You mentioned about warning the children. One of the reaction that maybe could be happening to the adults, maybe not warning, but thinking of like a stronger C word. Yeah, kind of like condemning them. Cautioning, the children could certainly work. There's no I in condemn. Along with comfort, could be something like reassure. If it is to the adults, and certainly, the whole condemning could be going toward them, but what else could it be, in relationship to their own children? Advise, yeah, that could work. Michelle reads. Okay, I thought I had hand going up. Advise, prevent, like from, don't let them fall off the cliff. Well, because prevent could go into a lot of different ways. Carol, you said advise, right? Okay, I won't forget about that one. Can you necessarily prevent that from happening? Probably not, but certainly you might be able to prevent from making it worse. Certainly, we've all been in situations where it's already bad enough. We don't need to escalate it any worse by adding, more pressure and whatnot to it. So that's where that whole advisory role, educate, certainly could be some aspects to it. But now when it gets to, yesterday, what's the point? What's the purpose? Well, these end up being some pretty strong purposes. None of them are the word show, thank goodness. That now does give a specific idea to, okay, what's the message that Sounder's trying to get across? Next week, when you get your prompt, we're going to take a couple days and look at it in detail, go over these things so you can kind of start to decide which one of those, if any, may work best for you. And that's next period, right?